An excise, or excise tax, is any duty on manufactured goods that is levied at the moment of manufacture rather than at sale. Excises are often associated with customs duties. Customs are levied on goods that come into existence as taxable items at the border, while excise is levied on goods that came into existence inland. Although sometimes referred to as a tax, excise is specifically a duty. Tax is technically a levy on an individual, while duty is a levy on particular goods. An excise is considered an indirect tax, meaning that the producer or seller who pays the levy to the government is expected to try to recover their loss by raising the price paid by the eventual buyer of the goods. Excises are typically imposed in addition to an indirect tax such as a sales tax or value-added tax. Typically, an excise is distinguished from a sales tax or VAT in three ways. Typical examples of excise duties are taxes on gasoline and other fuels and taxes on tobacco and alcohol. Excise is derived from the Dutch accent, which is presumed to come from the Latin excensere, meaning simply to tax. Excise was introduced in the mid-17th century under the Puritan regime in the British Isles. Upon the restoration of the monarchy, many of the Puritan social restrictions were overturned, but excise was reintroduced under the 10 Years' Abolition Act 1660, in lieu of rent, for tenancies of royally owned land which had not already become socage. Although the affected tenancies were limited in number, the excise was levied more generally. At the time, there was thought to be a rough correspondence between the wealthy manufacturers of affected goods and the wealthy tenants of royal land. Excise duties or taxes continued to serve political as well as financial ends. Public safety and health, public morals, environmental protection, and national defense are all rationales for the imposition of an excise. In defense of excises on strong drink, Adam Smith wrote, "It has for some time past been the policy of Great Britain to discourage the consumption of spirituous liquors, on account of their supposed tendency to ruin the health and to corrupt the morals of the common people." Samuel Johnson was less flattering in his 1755 dictionary. Excise, N.S. a hateful tax levied upon commodities, and are judged not by the common judges of property, but wretches hired by those to whom excise is paid. As a deterrent, excise is typically directed towards three broad categories of harm. Monies raised through excise may be earmarked for redress of specific social costs commonly associated with the product or service on which it is levied. Tobacco tax revenues, for example, might be spent on government anti-smoking campaigns, or healthcare for cancer, heart disease, vascular disease, lung disease, and so on. In some countries, excise is also levied on some goods for purely punitive reasons. Many U.S. states impose excise on illegal substances. These places do not consider it to be a revenue source, but instead regard it as a means of imposing a greater level of punishment by opening up convicted criminals to the charge of tax evasion. These are the three main targets of excise taxation in most countries around the world. They are everyday items of mass usage, as well as diesel and certain other fuels. Meanwhile, have excise tax imposed on them mainly because they pollute the environment and to raise funds to support the transportation infrastructure. Following the legalization of non-medical cannabis in the United States, states that have implemented legal markets have imposed new excise taxes on sales of cannabis products. These taxes have been used to build support for legalization initiatives by raising revenue for general spending purposes. Some U.S. states tax transactions involving illegal drugs. Gambling licenses are subject to excise in many countries today. In 18th century England, and for a brief time in British North America, gambling itself was for a time also subject to taxation, in the form of stamp duty, whereby a revenue stamp had to be placed on the ace of spades in every pack of cards to demonstrate that the duty had been paid. Suggests that its implementation to cards and dice can be viewed as a type of excise duty on gambling. Profits of bookmakers are subject to general betting duty in the United Kingdom. Prostitution has been proposed to bear excise tax in separate bills in the Canadian Parliament. and in the Nevada legislature proposed wordings. One of the most notorious taxes in the whole of history was France's gabelle of salt. Although that was a sales tax, rather than an excise, salt has been subject to excise in some countries, along with many other substances which would, in today's world, seem rather unusual, such as paper and coffee. In fact, salt was taxed as early as the 2nd century, and as late as the 20th. Many different reasons have been given for the taxation of such substances. But have us